neither of these initiatives produced a way forward to ensuring the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. The military escalation between Israel and Iran since 13 June and United States airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities on 21 June complicated prospects for achieving full implementation of Resolution 2231. Iran strikes yesterday on a base in Qatar, an action which the Secretary General condemned, further exacerbated insecurity in an already tense region. Madam President, earlier today, the Secretary General welcomed the announcement by the United States, in coordination with Qatar, of a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Iran, and urged them to respect it fully. This is a significant achievement that potentially pulls Iran, Israel, and the region back from the brink. The people of Iran and Israel have already suffered too much. According to the Iranian Ministry of Health, since the start of the conflict, at least 606 people have been killed, with 107 killed in the past 24 hours and 5,332 injured. According to Israeli authorities, 28 people were killed and 1,472 were injured during the conflict. Madam President, in its quarterly report of 31 May 2025, the International Atomic Energy Agency observed that the significantly increased production and accumulation of highly enriched uranium by the Islamic Republic of Iran was of serious concern. The IAEA reiterated that its verification and monitoring activities related to the JCPOA have been seriously affected by the cessation of implementation by Iran of its nuclear-related commitments under the plan. The agency also again noted that it had lost its continuity of knowledge on many aspects of Iran's nuclear program, as it had not been able to perform verification and monitoring activities in the Islamic Republic of Iran for more than 4 years. In addition, the IAEA noted it was unable to verify the total stockpile of enriched uranium in the country and had not done so since February 2021. During the reporting period, the Secretary General received several communications from JCPOA participants. On 17 March, the permanent representatives of China, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the Russian Federation shared a joint statement adopted at their meeting of 14 March in Beijing, in which they stressed the importance of Resolution 2231, including its timeframes. In a separate letter received the same day, the permanent representative of China shared a proposal for the settlement of the Iranian nuclear issue, highlighting the JCPOA as the basis for a new consensus and cooperation through dialogue and a step-by-step and reciprocal approach. In letters received on 9, 11, and 12 June, the permanent representatives of France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the Russian Federation shared their different views regarding the causes of the impasse in the implementation of Resolution 2231. Despite their diverging outlooks, all 5 member states reiterated the importance of negotiations and reaffirmed their commitment to finding a diplomatic solution. Madam President, I'll now turn to the restrictive measures set out in Annex B to Resolution 2231. The only measures that remain in effect pertain to nuclear activities and transfers. Those measures will remain in place until 18 October 2025, unless decided otherwise by the Council. The Secretariat received no allegations of violations of these provisions during the reporting period. Moreover, no new proposals have been submitted in the procurement channel in the last 6 months of the reporting cycle. The Security Council, however, received 8 notifications regarding the nuclear-related restrictive measures for certain activities consistent with the JCPOA. Madam President, at the heart of this conflict is the nature of Iran's nuclear program. Following the deadly clashes of the past 12 days, the ceasefire agreement is an opportunity to avoid a catastrophic escalation and achieve a peaceful resolution of the Iran nuclear issue. Diplomacy, dialogue, and verification remain the best option to ensure the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program and to bring about concrete economic benefits to the people of Iran. As the Secretary General said earlier today, the United Nations stands ready to support all efforts that advance peace, dialogue, and stability in the region. And finally, Madam President, the Secretariat will continue to support the implementation of 2231 until the termination date of 18 October. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank His Excellency Samuel Zbogar of Slovenia for his leadership as Security Council Facilitator for the implementation of the resolution. I also thank the coordinator of the Procurement Working Group of the Joint Commissioner for our continued cooperation. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank Ms. Di Carlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis.
Thank you, Madam President. It is an honor to have the opportunity to address the Council on behalf of the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Ms. Kaja Kallas, in her capacity as coordinator of the Joint Commission of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. I would also like to thank Secretary General Antonio Guterres and the Secretariat for their work related to the implementation of Resolution 2231, as well as Slovenia as the facilitator of Resolution 2231. We take note of the 19th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231. This session takes place under most serious circumstances, with a dangerous cycle of escalation following military action against nuclear-related sites in Iran. In view of this, the UN Secretary General on Sunday stated in this Council that there is a growing risk that this conflict could rapidly get out of control, with catastrophic consequences for civilians, the region, and the world. We welcome the announced ceasefire and urge all sides to effectively implement it. The High Representative is engaged and has been following very closely the situation in the Middle East and reiterates the EU's strong commitment to regional security, including the security of the State of Israel, and the call on all sides to abide by international law, show restraint, and refrain from taking further steps which could lead to serious consequences, such as potential radioactive release. Madam President, ensuring that Iran does not acquire or develop a nuclear weapon remains a key security priority for the European Union. IAEA DG Grossi at the end of May reported on the further expansion of enrichment capacity and operation, as well as on a sharp increase in the production of 60% enriched uranium, close to military levels. Iran was already far away from its JCPOA commitments. Iran chose to continue the dramatic expansion of its program at an alarming pace, going beyond what is plausibly necessary for a civilian program. In the special session of the IAEA Board of Governors on 23 June, DG Grossi raised the need to account for the stockpile of highly enriched uranium following the events of the last days. Moreover, it has been more than 4 years that the agency has not been able to perform all JCPOA-related monitoring activities and has therefore lost the continuity of knowledge as regards several key components of the nuclear program of Iran. We continue to recognize that Iran has faced and continues facing very serious negative economic consequences following the U.S.'s withdrawal from the JCPOA and the reimposition of previously lifted U.S. unilateral sanctions. The U.S. has also gradually imposed additional sanctions linked to the nuclear program. Many efforts have been made to preserve the JCPOA, notably when the High Representative put forward a compromise text, laying down the necessary steps needed for the U.S. to return to the JCPOA and for Iran to resume the full implementation of its commitments. These efforts did not lead to the expected results, and we are now in the current situation. Madam President, in 4 months from now, the Security Council will no longer be seized of the Iran nuclear issue under Resolution 2231, and we urgently need to come back to a diplomatic solution. Let us be clear in what will be the last session in this format under UNSCR 2231. A lasting solution to the Iranian nuclear issue can only be through a negotiated deal, not military action. A fully functioning nuclear deal will be conducive to the stabilization of the whole region. Last Friday, as part of an intense diplomatic engagement, EU High Representative Kallas, together with the foreign ministers of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, met with the Iranian foreign minister in Geneva. They reiterated the long-standing concerns about Iran's expansion of its nuclear program, and they discussed avenues towards a negotiated solution. The matter can only be addressed in a sustainable manner with the adequate involvement of the international community. Moreover, the IAEA is and should remain the sole impartial and independent international organization to monitor and verify the implementation of Iran's nuclear non-proliferation commitments. Diplomacy, Madam President, must prevail. The European Union High Representative will continue to contribute to all diplomatic efforts to reduce tensions and to find a lasting solution to the Iran nuclear issue. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Lambrinidis for his briefing. I now give the floor to Ambassador Samuels Vogar.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm speaking in my capacities as the Security Council's appointed facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231. The 90th Facilitator's report was agreed by Council members on 20th June 2025. I would like to thank all Council members for their cooperation and constructive engagement in this process, and for their willingness to seek consensus and compromise in preparing the report. As this is Slovenia's first report as facilitator since taking up the role on 29th May 2025, I'm especially grateful for everyone's kind support and the extra flexibility shown due to resulting time constraints. The report provides a factual account of the activities related to the 2231 format of the Security Council, which took place from 14th December 2024 to 23rd June 2025. It includes several subsections, namely the summaries of activities, monitoring the implementation of the resolution, relevant communications, key aspects of the workings of the procurement channel, as well as transparency, outreach, and guidance. You may refer to the report for details, but I wish to mention the following key aspects. First, one meeting of the Council in the 2231 format was held during this reporting period. The meeting was held on 23rd June 2025, and representatives of the Security Council discussed the findings and recommendations contained in the 90th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231 prior to its public release. Under-Secretary General Di Carlo has already referred to this report in her statement. Second, during the reporting period, a total of 19 notes were circulated within the 2231 format. In addition, a total of 10 official communications were sent to Member States and the coordinator of the Procurement Working Group of the Joint Commission, and a total of 10 communications from Member States and the coordinator were received. Among the communications circulated were the 2 regular quarterly reports issued by the International Atomic Energy Agency in February and May 2025. The key aspects of these agency reports are duly reflected in my report. The IAEA plays an important role in the verification and monitoring of nuclear activities in the Islamic Republic of Iran, as requested under Resolution 2231. The IAEA's work provides confidence for the international community that the nuclear program of the Islamic Republic of Iran is for exclusively peaceful purposes, in accordance with the modalities set out in the JCPOA. The reports of Director General play a significant role in this regard. Thirdly, I report that no new proposals were submitted to the Security Council through the procurement channel during the reporting period. The procurement channel represents a key transparency and confidence-building mechanism under the JCPOA. It remains operational, and the procurement working group stands ready to review proposals. Madam President, we are approaching the termination day of Resolution 2231 in October, and this may be the last report in this framework. I reiterate that the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, as endorsed by this Council through Resolution 2231, has been the best available option to ensure that the Iranian nuclear program remains exclusively peaceful. The 2231 format is obviously facing a challenging environment, and the situation in the region is unfolding, as exemplified also by numerous letters submitted to the Security Council President in the last couple of weeks. I firmly believe, however, that through dialogue and multilateralism, we can make the utmost effort in ensuring that the plan and Resolution 2231 are implemented effectively, promoting mutual trust and cooperation. In this regard, we hope for diplomatic efforts to find a way forward. Madam President, finally, I would like to state that as facilitator, I will do my utmost to support the implementation of Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA, which underpins it. My team and myself will continue to work closely with all Council members in an impartial and transparent manner to meet our shared responsibility. I look forward to further strengthening our dialogue and cooperation for the remainder of our mandate. Thank you.
I thank Ambassador Bogar for his briefing. I will now give the floor to those Council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you, Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Ambassador Stavros Lambrinidis for your briefings. As we reflect today on the conclusions of the Secretary General's final report on the implementation of Resolution 2231, Iran continues to openly violate its UN obligations. Tehran has sustained its provision of arms to the Houthis in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon, both in violation of UN Security Council resolutions. Moreover, Iran did not comply with relevant 2231 provisions when they were in place, as evidenced by hundreds of drones it transferred to Russia in 2022 for use in attacks against Ukraine. Iran's failure to uphold its non-proliferation obligations has prolonged conflicts and perpetuated instability across the Middle East and beyond for many years. The International Atomic Energy Agency's most recent report on verification and monitoring in Iran, in light of UN Security Council Resolution 2231, demonstrates plainly that Iran continued to accelerate its nuclear activities without any credible civilian justification. On June 12th, the IAEA Board of Governors found Iran in noncompliance for its many failures to uphold obligatory nuclear safeguards. It is regrettable that certain members of this Council have opted to turn a blind eye to, if not encourage, Iranian noncompliance. The United States will not turn a blind eye to Iran's noncompliance and ongoing threat to regional stability. Madam President, President Trump has clearly reiterated that it is time for Iran to make peace. Despite the President's continuous good faith efforts to negotiate and resolve these issues diplomatically, Iran's leaders stonewalled and ultimately refused to agree to a deal that would have prevented them from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. On June 21st, a U.S. precision operation effectively fulfilled our narrow objective to degrade Iran's capacity to produce a nuclear weapon. These strikes, in accordance with the inherent right to self-defense, collective self-defense, consistent with the UN Charter, aimed to mitigate the threat posed by Iran to Israel, the region, and to more broadly international peace and security. Following this historic operation, President Trump immediately coordinated a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Madam President, in this critical moment, we must all urge Iran to seize this opportunity for peace and prosperity and abide by its international obligations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Madam President, thank you. I wish to thank the Undersecretary General Di Carlo for her briefing and also for nice words addressed to me and my team as facilitators of the implementation of the 2231 resolution. And I want to thank also the representative of the European Union for his insights. Madam President, JCPOA is undoubtedly one of the greatest achievements of multilateralism of the past decade. A unified position amongst the key actors was a decisive factor. It brought about a robust regime that comprehensively addressed a pressing international security issue. Regrettably, it suffered its share of tough trials and setbacks in recent years. To our regret, the US withdrew from it, and Iran gradually made several steps away from its JCPOA commitments. Slovenia remains deeply concerned by the continued alarming expansion of Iran's nuclear program. The re-establishment of Iranian constructive engagement with the IAEA is key and will help Iran to regain the international community's confidence about its nuclear activities. We have consistently condemned Iran's unacceptable disregard for its non-proliferation obligations, including the IAEA Safeguard Agreement. Slovenia has zero tolerance for nuclear proliferation. However, Slovenia has also zero tolerance for attacks against nuclear infrastructure anywhere. Madam President, the Iran nuclear file is on a decidedly wrong path, and we urgently need a change of pace. We welcome the announcement of a ceasefire, which is an important step towards restoring stability in the region. We join the calls to both parties to respect it. Madam President, this is potentially the last regular Council meeting about the implementation of JCPOA and Resolution 2231. It seems like an era is coming to a close, and it is uncertain what the ensuing era will bring. The latest developments in the region add the unpredictability and raise questions about the future of not only Iran, but the whole region and the nuclear non-proliferation architecture. One thing is certain, though. As October and the Termination Day are approaching, it is important to recall that JCPOA's objectives remain valid. We need diplomacy, and we need it now. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I thank Undersecretary General Rosemary Di Carlo for a valuable briefing. And I also thank the European Union Head of Delegation to the United Nations, His Excellency Stavros Lambridinis, and Ambassador Samuel Zboga, the United Nations Security Council Facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231, for their important remarks and valuable contributions. We welcome the Secretary General's report, which reaffirms that diplomacy remains the best and indeed the only viable path for addressing concerns relating to Iran's nuclear program and regional security. We are deeply concerned by a report of Iran's decision to enrich uranium beyond research-grade thresholds in contravention of its obligations under Article 3 of the NPT. Such enrichment risks eroding confidence in the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear activities and raises legitimate questions regarding compliance with its safeguards commitment. These concerns, we insist, must be addressed within the NPT framework and in full compliance with international law, including the Charter of the United Nations. We call on Iran to restore full transparency by reinstalling all IAEA monitoring equipment, concluding the additional protocol without delay, continuing cooperation with the IAEA, and granting the agency unhindered access to all nuclear facilities. Security Council Resolution 2231 remains the principal non-proliferation framework for Iran. Its provisions regarding nuclear-related transfers, verification measures, and the procurement channel will sunset on 18 October 2025. A failure to achieve measurable progress by that date will weaken the Council's authority, undermine the global non-proliferation architecture, and erode confidence in the NPT three pillars: non-proliferation, disarmament, and the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Sierra Leone reaffirms its unwavering support for the IAEA's verification mandate and underscores the imperative of protecting safeguarded nuclear facilities. Safeguarded nuclear installations serve exclusively peaceful purposes and must remain inviolable. International humanitarian law obliges all parties to refrain from attacks on such facilities, the destruction of which could release hazardous materials with devastating consequences for civilians and the environment. Should further strikes occur on safeguarded nuclear facilities, this Council must be prepared to act decisively in the discharge of its primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security. Madam President, Sierra Leone commends the JCPOA coordinators' continued effort to engage all participants, including the United States, in pursuit of full implementation of the plan. We welcome the 4 new notifications under Annex B of Resolution 2231, which reflect ongoing legitimate nuclear cooperation. We call on all states to safeguard the integrity of the procurement channel and to refrain from any actions that might undermine JCPOA commitment or jeopardize the diplomatic momentum vital to non-proliferation efforts. To advance Resolution 2231, strengthen the NPT, and avert further escalation, Sierra Leone proposes the following 5 points as a roadmap. First, with respect to the ongoing conflict, and which I shall return to shortly, we urge the urgent need for a comprehensive ceasefire, an immediate cessation of all reciprocal strikes, and sustained measures to de-escalate tensions and return to dialogue. We welcome the announcement of a ceasefire reportedly reached between Israel and Iran, as announced by President Donald Trump of the United States, and we urge the parties to demonstrate good faith and fully comply with this agreement. Second, full and unrestricted IAEA verification consistent with NPT safeguards, including the prompt reactivation of all monitoring equipment and comprehensive application of all additional protocol. Third, the revival of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action through sustained coordinated diplomacy involving the E3, Iran, the United States, and regional partners. Fourth, continued operation of the procurement channel and calibrated sanctions relief linked to verifiable compliance as a means of building confidence in legitimate peaceful nuclear trade. Fifth and finally, the exploration of additional confidence-building measures, including IAEA-supervised fuel swaps and intensified regional dialogue aimed at establishing a Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. Madam President, turning briefly to the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran with the involvement of the United States, Sierra Leone recalls a statement of 20 and 22nd June 2025 in which we caution that recent military escalation has gravely undermined diplomatic efforts essential to diffusing this crisis. We are equally concerned by Iran's missile strikes on 23rd June against a United States military base in Qatar. While Qatar's air defenses successfully intercepted the missiles as reported and prevented casualties, these attacks triggered regional airspace closures and heightened instability. Such actions could imperil diplomatic channels and risk drawing additional actors into a broader regional conflict. We continue to reiterate the centrality of Article 2.4 of the UN Charter and stress that no reliance on Article 51 can justify violations of this fundamental prohibition on the use of force. On this International Day of Women in Diplomacy, we join in echoing the Secretary General's call to, and I quote, give peace a chance, end of quote, through an immediate ceasefire, de-escalation, sustained diplomacy, and the urgent resumption of negotiations. In closing, Madam President, Leone underscores the imperative of upholding the UN Charter in good faith, particularly Articles 2, 25, and 103, which enshrine the primacy of peaceful dispute resolution and the binding nature of Council's decision. In this regard, with the sunset of Resolution 2231 looming on 18 October 2025, the clock is ticking. Member States must now rise to the challenge and demonstrate the statecraft demanded by their Charter's obligation. This moment must be seized to reinforce the global non-proliferation regime, advance disarmament, facilitate peaceful nuclear cooperation, and reaffirm our collective commitment under the NPT. The alternative is simply unthinkable. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, we would like to thank Under-Secretary General DiCarlo and Ambassador Zogbar and Lambridis for their briefings. We appreciate their continuing efforts to support the implementation of Resolution 2231 of 2015 and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA. We take note of the Secretary General's 19th report on the implementation of Resolution 2231 of 2015 and the Joint Commission's report on the status of the Procurement Working Group decisions. Madam President, Resolution 2231 and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action represent significant achievements of multilateral diplomacy, and we continue to view them as vital pillars for regional and international peace and security. We note with concern the findings of the Secretary General's 19th report and the Facilitator's 6-month report, which highlight the ongoing challenges facing the full implementation of the JCPOA. This briefing takes place in a deeply dangerous context, where recent developments have shifted focus away from diplomatic efforts to address the Iranian nuclear program. The evolving geopolitical landscape in the Middle East underscores the critical importance of Resolution 2231 in preventing further escalation and weapons of mass destruction proliferation in the region. Madam President, Somalia welcomes the recent ceasefire between Israel and Iran and urge all parties to fully respect and abide by it. This development is a positive step towards reducing tensions in the region and demonstrates the potential for diplomacy even in challenging circumstances. Our delegation encourages all stakeholders to exercise maximum restraint and to avoid actions that could further escalate tensions. We are particularly concerned by the humanitarian consequences of recent escalations, which have resulted in the loss of civilian lives and damage to critical infrastructure. Our delegation echoes the Secretary General's call for immediate de-escalation and urge all parties to prioritize diplomacy and dialogue over confrontation. Somalia acknowledged the divergent perspectives among Council members and the JCPOA participants regarding the causes of the current impasse. We believe that mutual respect, patience, and a genuine commitment to dialogue are essential to overcoming these differences. The international community must remain united in its support for the peaceful resolution of disputes and the preservation of the non-proliferation regime. As the expiration date of Resolution 2231 approaches, we encourage all member states to continue engaging constructively and transparently in support of the JCPOA. Madam President, Somalia believes that a balanced approach which addresses the concerns of all parties is essential to resolving the current situation. To conclude, Somalia reiterates its unswerving support for the JCPOA and Resolution 2231. We call upon all parties to redouble their diplomatic efforts to address outstanding issues in good faith and to work collectively towards a peaceful and a sustainable solution that enhances security for the region and the world. Thank you. I thank you, Madam.
I thank the representative of Somalia for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. I extend my gratitude to USG Rosemary DiCarlo and Ambassador Lambrinidis for their briefings. I also appreciate the permanent representative of Slovenia for his role as the new facilitator. At the outset, the Republic of Korea truly welcomes the announced ceasefire between Iran and Israel. We commend the parties concerned for exercising restraint and choosing the path of de-escalation at a perilous moment when conflicts could have further escalated. As the Secretary General has rightly pointed out in this chamber, the core issue underlying this conflict is the nuclear question. And a significant trust gap has long existed with respect to Iran's nuclear program. Our shared concerns on Iran's nuclear program and outstanding NPT safeguards issues remain unaddressed. The latest IAEA reports have indicated Iran's continuous and rapid expansion of its uranium enrichment activities. And the IAEA Director General's comprehensive assessment has concluded that the agency is not in a position to verify that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. Consequently, the IAEA Board of Governors adopted a resolution on Iran's outstanding safeguard issues. Madam President, as a result of this persistent trust gap, which Iran has long dismissed and failed to properly address, we have witnessed a military conflict unfold over the past 12 days, which has been a source of grave concern for us. We now find ourselves entering a new phase. Nevertheless, we note that even after the ceasefire, the limited availability of relevant information is causing considerable uncertainty. This uncertainty makes it challenging to accurately assess the situation on the ground and to consider the appropriate path forward. And precisely because of such uncertainties, our objective as embodied in Resolution 2231 remains unchanged. We have consistently worked to ensure the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear activities. To this end, it is critical that the IAEA's monitoring and verification activities continue without hindrance. As a first step, we therefore expect Iran to fully guarantee the IAEA's unhindered access in the aftermath of the ceasefire. This will also enable the agency to promptly resume its monitoring and verification activities in Iran in accordance with its mandate on nuclear safety, security, and safeguards. Madam President, while the Iranian nuclear issue remains unresolved, we note with concern that Security Council Resolution 2231 is set to expire this October. Without further action, the Council's direct mandate on the Iranian nuclear file will lapse. In this regard, we strongly urge Iran to ensure full and transparent cooperation with the IAEA. The Republic of Korea fully supports the agency's pivotal role in this important process. Based on the IAEA's reliable information, we trust that the Council will be able to make an informed and responsible decision. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much,
D'abord, je
Madam
remercie le
President. I would
secrétariat,
like
Madame la
to
secrétaire
thank
générale adjointe pour les affaires
the
politiques,
USG for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs,
Monsieur le
Ms.
délégué
Rosemary
de l'Union
DiCarlo, the
européenne,
delegate
Monsieur
of the
Stavros
EU, Mr.
ainsi que
Stavros
notre collègue
Lambrinidis,
représentant
and our
permanent de
colleague, the
Slovénie,
permanent representative of
facilitateur
Slovenia,
chargé de promouvoir l'application
as
de la résolution
facilitator for the
2231.
implementation of
Pour les
Resolution
exposés,
2231.
ils nous ont
I thank them
rappelé
for
la
their
gravité de la
briefings. They've
séquence que
reminded
nous venons
us
de
of the
vivre,
seriousness of the events we've just
ainsi que la gravité
lived
des
through
problèmes
and
que
the
pose la
seriousness
façon dont l'Iran
of
conduit son
the way
programme
in which
nucléaire depuis des
Iran
années.
has been managing
Madame la
its nuclear
Présidente, tout
program
d'abord,
for
la
many
France
years.
salue l'annonce
Firstly,
par le
Madam,
président des
France welcomes the
États-Unis
announcement
d'un
by the
cessez-le-feu
United States of a
entre Israël et
ceasefire
l'Iran.
between Israel and
Depuis
Iran.
le 13 juin, nous avons
Since the
suivi avec
13th of June,
préoccupation
we
les
followed
frappes
with
échangées
concern
entre l'Israël et
the
l'Iran,
strikes,
puis
the
les frappes
exchanges
menées par les
between
États-Unis
Iran
contre
and
trois
Israel,
sites
and
nucléaires
then
iraniens.
the U.S. strikes against
Ces
3
opérations militaires comportent
Iranian
un risque
nuclear
majeur d'escalade
facilities. There is a
qui aurait
major
pu
risk
avoir
for
de lourdes
escalation which
conséquences
could
pour
have
la
serious
stabilité
consequences
régionale.
for regional stability.
Le cessez-le-feu doit
The
maintenant conduire à
ceasefire
un arrêt
must now
complet des
lead to a
hostilités que
complete
nous appelons
cessation of
l'ensemble des
hostilities, which
parties à respecter.
we call on all parties to
Il est dans
respect.
l'intérêt de tous
It is
d'éviter un
in
nouveau
the
cycle
interest
de
of
violence.
everyone to
Le
avoid a new
cessez-le-feu doit
cycle of
permettre la
violence. The
reprise de
ceasefire must
négociations
allow
sur
for
la
the
question
resumption of
nucléaire iranienne
negotiations on the
et
Iranian
sur
nuclear
l'ensemble
issue
des
and
défis
on all
sécuritaires
of
posés
the
par l'Iran.
security
C'est pour
challenges
plaider en faveur de
posed
telles
by Iran. And that
négociations
is why
que le
we
ministre des
call
Affaires étrangères,
the
Jean-Noël
Minister
Barrot, avec
of
ses homologues
Foreign
allemands,
Affairs
britanniques et
with the
européens,
British,
a rencontré
EU,
au
and
ministère
UK
des Affaires
counterparts
étrangères iranien vendredi
has
dernier à Genève.
contacted the
La
Iranian
position
foreign
de la
minister
France
in
est
Geneva
claire.
last Friday.
La
Our
question
position is
nucléaire
clear. The
iranienne ne
nuclear
peut être
Iranian
durablement
position
résolue que par la
can
voie
only be, or
diplomatique.
issue can only be
Au
resolved
regard
through
des risques de
diplomatic means, given the
prolifération et
risk
des
of
menaces pour la paix et
proliferation
la
and threats
sécurité
to international
internationale,
peace and
il
security.
est primordial
It
que
is
le Conseil de
essential for this Security
sécurité en reste
Council
saisi.
to remain
Madame
seized
la
of this
Présidente,
matter. Madam President,
alors que nous nous réunissons pour
while we
examiner
are
la mise en
meeting
œuvre
to
de la
consider the
résolution
implementation
2231
of Resolution
à quelques mois de son
2231 a few
expiration,
months prior
il
to
n'est
its
pas inutile de rappeler le déroulé des
expiration,
événements qui ont
we
amené
must
à la
recall
situation
the
actuelle.
development of events which
Sans
have led to
remonter à
the current
2003, le
situation.
règlement
Without
par la
going back
diplomatie de
to
la question nucléaire
2003, the
iranienne est
Iranian
la raison
nuclear
d'être
issue
de
is the
l'accord de
very
Vienne de
raison d'être of
2015,
the
porté par le
2015 agreement
E3+3,
with the
ainsi que la
E3+3, as well as
2231,
Resolution
par laquelle le
2231,
Conseil
through
avait
which this
endossé
Council had
cet accord.
endorsed this agreement.
Depuis, les Européens n'ont
Since
jamais
then,
cessé de mettre en
Europeans
œuvre
have
leurs engagements au
continued
titre
to
de
implement
l'accord,
their
y
commitments
compris
under
après
the
le retrait
agreement,
par les
including
États-Unis
after,
en
following the
2018.
withdrawal of the United States in
L'Iran a pris la
2018. Iran
responsabilité
has
en
taken the
2019
responsibility in
de cesser
2019
de
of
mettre en œuvre ses
ceasing to
engagements.
implement
Nous avons alors
its
recouru, plusieurs l'ont
commitments.
rappelé, au
As
mécanisme
you
de
will
règlement
recall,
des
we
différends
used the
prévu par l'accord.
mechanism for
Dans ce
dispute
cadre, le E3 a
settlements under the
déployé
agreement.
d'importants
The
efforts
three
diplomatiques
then
pour
carried
obtenir
out
le
diplomatic
retour
efforts
des
to
États-Unis
achieve
dans
the
l'accord
return of
et
the
pour
U.S. to the
ramener
agreement
l'Iran
and to
au
bring
respect de
Iran
ses engagements.
to respect its
L'Iran s'est vu
commitments.
offrir en effet en
And in point of fact, in
2022,
2022,
deux propositions d'accord
Iran had
révisées.
two
Nous
revised
déplorons
proposals,
qu'il n'ait pas
and
saisi
we
ces
regret the
occasions.
fact that these
Au cours des
opportunities
dernières
were
années,
missed. In
l'Iran s'est
recent
au
years,
contraire engagé
Iran,
dans
on the
une
contrary,
escalade de
has
son
become
programme
engaged
nucléaire.
in an
Il a
escalation of
enfreint la
its nuclear program
quasi-totalité des limites
it has almost exceeded the limits under the agreement. By the end of 2025, the uranium stocks in Iran was 40 times above the limit set under the agreement. That includes more than 400 highly enriched kilograms of uranium. The enrichment to this level has no credible civilian use, and the Director General of the IAEA has underscored the fact that Iran was the only non-nuclear weapon state to enrich uranium to that level. According to the IAEA, Iran would have 9 significant amounts, that is 9 times the quantity of material from which a nuclear weapon could be developed. This escalation has led to serious doubts about the nature of the Iranian nuclear program, and the Director General of the IAEA himself has said that he was not in a position to guarantee the peaceful nature, and a resolution adopted on the 12th of June by the Board of Governors acknowledged the violation of that agreement by Iran. Over the years, Iran has at the same time pursued its ballistic missile program, which could be used as a vector for nuclear weapons. Iran has refused any substantial cooperation with the EU, and it has removed the monitoring equipment that was established and removed their accreditation, the accreditation from some of the experts. Because of these obstacles, the agency no longer has continued knowledge of all of the Iranian nuclear programs. Iran has multiplied its disturbing threats to leave the NPT. We would call on Iran to resume full cooperation with the agency, and in particular to allow for access as soon as possible to its nuclear facility. It is essential for the agency to determine that the uranium stocks have not been moved, and we express our support for the Director General of the IAEA and the teams carrying out their activities with professionalism and impartiality. Access by Iran to nuclear weapons would threaten international and regional peace and security. It endangers the integrity of the non-proliferation regime, namely the Iranian issue continues to deserve the concern of the Council. On the 18th of October, the 2025 Resolution 2231 will come to an end. We call on Iran to return to dialogue so that we can find a robust, verifiable, and lasting diplomatical solution responding to all legitimate concerns of the international community on the Iranian nuclear program. France, with the EU and the E3 in close cooperation with the United States, will remain mobilized to that end, and we are determined to conclude an agreement which will take account of the non-proliferation regime, regional stability, and European security interests. France and its EU partners would remain mobilized under Resolution 2231, the snap-back provision, if such an agreement were not to be found by the summer. Since 2003, we have sought a diplomatic solution to guarantee in the long term the possibility of Iran not having a nuclear program. That remains our priority.
I thank the representative of France for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, Presidenta. Saludamos y agradecemos a la Secretaria General Adjunta de Asuntos Políticos y de la Consolidación de la Paz, señora Rosemary DiCarlo, al representante del coordinador de la Comisión Conjunta y jefe de la Delegación de la Unión Europea ante Naciones Unidas, Su Excelencia Stavros Lambrinidis, y al facilitador sobre la implementación de la Resolución 2231 del Consejo de Seguridad, embajador Samuel Svoboda. Recibimos con interés y esperanza el anuncio de intenciones para un alto al fuego entre Israel e Irán. Consideramos que esa posibilidad representaría una oportunidad valiosa para reducir las tensiones y abrir un espacio para el diálogo y la paz. Esperamos que este alto al fuego sea el primer paso hacia negociaciones más amplias que permitan avanzar hacia soluciones duraderas y que contribuyan a la estabilidad de toda la región. Panamá toma nota del informe presentado por el facilitador sobre la implementación de la Resolución 2231 y agradece los esfuerzos realizados en su elaboración. Asimismo, acogemos con atención el 19º informe del Secretario General y compartimos su preocupación ante la crítica situación regional que actualmente rodea al Plan de Acción Integral Conjunto. Reconocemos el valor de los acuerdos multilaterales en materia nuclear como pilares esenciales para la paz y la seguridad internacionales. El Plan de Acción Integral Conjunto fue sin duda uno de los mayores logros del multilateralismo en materia de no proliferación. Retomar ese mecanismo y darle una nueva oportunidad es reafirmar nuestro compromiso con la diplomacia. Mantenemos preocupación por el hecho de que las disposiciones de Resolución 2231 expirarán el 18 de octubre de 2025. A pesar de la fecha, los objetivos tanto de la resolución como del plan aún no se han cumplido plenamente. Asimismo, nos preocupa que la verificación y el monitoreo del OIEA relacionados con el PAI han sido gravemente afectados por el cese del cumplimiento por parte de Irán, como fue señalado por el informe más reciente del director general de la OIEA. En este contexto, reiteramos que nuestra posición, basada en principios fundamentales de la política exterior panameña, es dar prioridad al fortalecimiento del régimen global de no proliferación, el respeto a dicha arquitectura multilateral y la promoción del diálogo diplomático como vía para mitigar tensiones y reducir los riesgos estratégicos. Sin embargo, no podemos pasar por alto los acontecimientos más recientes que no hacen sino deteriorar la ya frágil confianza existente y generan serias inquietudes sobre el programa nuclear iraní, así como el cumplimiento verificable de los compromisos internacionales asumidos. El OIEA ha advertido a través de sus resoluciones que los ataques a instalaciones nucleares representan un riesgo significativo, ya que podrían provocar la liberación de material radioactivo. En este momento crítico, hacemos un llamado a Irán para que permita el monitoreo y la verificación de sus instalaciones por parte del personal del Organismo Internacional de Energía Atómica. También resulta fundamental comprender la magnitud y la escala de los daños ocasionados por los ataques más recientes, por lo que coincidimos con las palabras expresadas por el director general de la OIEA, Rafael Grossi, y abro comillas, establecer los hechos sobre el terreno es un requisito previo para cualquier acuerdo, y esto solo puede lograrse mediante inspecciones del OIEA. Asimismo, instamos a Irán a cumplir plenamente con los compromisos en el marco del Tratado sobre la no proliferación de armas nucleares TNP, así como de su acuerdo salvaguardias y de lo establecido en la Resolución 2231 de este Consejo, especialmente ante la posibilidad del desplazamiento de uranio enriquecido sin la debida supervisión del OIEA. No debemos permitir que se debilite la arquitectura de no proliferación, la cual ha proporcionado mayores garantías de estabilidad y seguridad internacionales al reducir significativamente el riesgo de que las armas nucleares se conviertan en fuente de confrontación o de conflicto. Es urgente en este contexto que las partes reanuden las negociaciones haciendo uso pleno del Plan de Acción Integral Conjunto, la Resolución 2231 del Consejo de Seguridad, así como también de los mecanismos bilaterales establecidos para avanzar hacia la estabilidad y seguridad regional y global. Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
I thank the representative of Panama for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Madam President, I thank USG Di Carlo and Ambassadors Zbogar and Lambrinidis for their comprehensive briefings. The Council convenes today on the implementation of Resolution 2231 of 2015, which endorsed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on Iran's nuclear program. And this is our last briefing on the implementation of this resolution, which expires on October this year. Needless to stress that this meeting comes at a critical juncture. We meet with cautious optimism, but real relief following the announcement of ceasefire between Iran and Israel, brokered by the United States and Qatar. We welcome this important diplomatic achievement, which puts an end to 12 days of dangerous escalation and provides much-needed space for the escalation, dialogue, and diplomacy. This latest episode has starkly demonstrated the fragility of our collective security and the serious risks associated with the targeting of nuclear facilities, particularly those under IAEA safeguards. The events of the past days have only reinforced the urgent need to uphold the principles of the nuclear non-proliferation regime and to refrain from any actions that could further undermine its integrity. Madam President, while this ceasefire represents really a positive development, it also serves as a reminder of the critical importance of respecting international legal norms, including those enshrined in the IAEA safeguard system. These safeguards are central to ensuring that nuclear energy is used exclusively for peaceful purposes. In this regard, we reiterate the importance of the full and balanced implementation of the JCPOA by all parties. Should I add, including its provisions related to the lifting of sanctions. It remains a key component and offers a practical framework for addressing concerns related to Iran's nuclear program through dialogue, transparency, and verification. As the Secretary General of the United Nations stated in his report, diplomacy remains the best and only way to address concerns regarding Iran's nuclear program and regional security issues. About the regional security issues, may I underscore the urgency of establishing a zone free of nuclear weapons and all other weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. Such a zone would represent a major step forward for regional and international peace and security. In this context, we recall Security Council Resolution 487, which called on Israel to place its nuclear installation under IAEA safeguards. More than 4 decades later, this call remain ignored, unanswered, unfulfilled. Madam President, to conclude, the announced ceasefire provides a valuable opportunity to reinforce the norms that underpin the global non-proliferation regime without selectivity, without double standard. Algeria stands ready to work with all partners to uphold international law and to strengthen the integrity of the global non-proliferation regime, a cornerstone of our shared security. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Госпожа председатель,
Madam President,
благодарим заместителя генерального секретаря ООН
Secretary
Розмари Ди
General
Карло
Rosemary
и
DiCarlo
координатора
and
Совета
Security Council
Безопасности по вопросу
Facilitator
дополнения
for the
резолюции
implementation of Resolution
2231,
31,
постоянно
the Council
представитель
Secretary of
Словении
Slovenia, Samuel Boger,
и, пользуясь случаем,
and
поздравляем
we also congratulate our Slovenian colleagues on
утверждением
the unanimous adoption of the 6-month
и
report of the
рассчитываем на их
Facilitator
дальнейшие усилия
and
по обеспечению
count on their
деятельности
continued
формата
efforts
2231
to support the
до завершения
activities
его
under the
работы в
2231
соответствии с
format
установленным сроком в
until
октябре
its scheduled
2025.
conclusion in October 2025.
Выслушали главу делегации
We've listened to
Европейского
the
Союза
head of delegation of the EU,
Lambrinidis.
Stavros Lambrinidis.
Госпожа председатель,
Madam
в ночь с
President,
12 на 13 июня государства, члены ООН
in the
и
night of
участник
June
дня
12th to 13th, member
подверглась
states of
неспровоцированной
the parties to the
агрессии, весь мир
NPT
оказался на грани
carried
масштабной
out
ядерной
unprovoked
катастрофы.
aggression, bringing the world to the brink of nuclear
Российская
disaster. The
Федерация
Russian
самым решительным
Federation
образом осуждает
strongly
атаки на территории
condemns
Исламской
the
Республики
attacks
Иран,
on Iran,
включая ее
including its
инфраструктуру
peaceful
мирного
nuclear
атома,
infrastructure,
находящуюся
which
под
is
гарантией
subject to
МАГАТЭ.
IAEA safeguards.
Действия
The
Соединенных Штатов и
actions of the
Израиля
U.S.
прямо
and
нарушили
Israel
Устав ООН,
directly violated the
резолюции Совета
UN Charter,
Безопасности, в том
Security
числе
Council
487
resolutions, including 487
обсуждаемый
and
сегодня
2231, which we're
2231,
discussing today,
а также Устав
as well
МАГАТЭ
as the
и профильные
Charter of the
резолюции
IAEA
Генконференции
and
агентства.
relevant resolutions of the
Они
IAEA General
представили собой
Conference.
прямое и
They
опаснейшее
constitute a
посягательство на
direct
авторитет
and
дня,
very dangerous
в
challenge to the
частности, на
authority of the
гарантированное статьей
NPT,
4 договора
especially
права Ирана
Iran's
на
right guaranteed
использование
under
атомной
Article
энергии в
4
мирных
of the
целях,
treaty to use nuclear
включая
energy for
обогащение
peaceful
урана,
purposes, including
и
uranium
является
enrichment.
болезненным ударом по
And
режиму
this was a
нераспространения.
major blow to the non-proliferation regime.
И все эти
And all
действия
of these
были совершены
actions
двумя
were
государствами,
carried
одно из
out by
которых
two
является
states, one of which is
депозитарием дня,
depositary of the
а второй и
NPT,
вовсе
while
на
the other,
протяжении десятилетий
for
уклоняется
decades,
от
has
присоединения
refused
к
to
этому
accede
важнейшему
to
элементу
this
международной
crucial element of
безопасности,
international
а также к
security,
подстановке своей
and has
ядерной
refused to
деятельности к
subject
гарантиям
its
МАГАТЭ.
nuclear activities to IAEA safeguards.
Кстати сказать,
By
несколько
the way,
удивлены
we are a
запросом
bit
Израиля на
surprised
участие в
at
нашем
Israel's
заседании,
request to take
проводимом
part
по
in our
пункту повестки
meeting,
дня
which is
нераспространения.
taking place under the
Хочется
agenda
верить в то,
item
что, возможно, это решение
non-proliferation.
предваряет
We would like to
присоединение
believe
страны к
that
дня,
this
в чем
decision hints at a
весь мир
potential
был бы
accession of this
заинтересован.
country to the NPT, which the entire world would love to see.
Коллеги, атаки на иранскую
Colleagues,
инфраструктуру, включая
attacking
предприятия
Iranian
ядерного
infrastructure,
топливного цикла,
including enterprises
создают
involved in the
реальную
nuclear
угрозу
fuel cycle,
тяжелейших
creates a
радиологических
real
последствий,
threat
которые могли ощутить
of
жители не
radiological
только Ирана, но и
consequences,
всего
which could
Ближнего
affect not only Iranians but the entire
Востока.
Middle
Все это,
East.
опять же, к
All of
сожалению,
this,
происходило даже не с
unfortunately,
молчаливого
again,
согласия,
happened
а с
not just with the
одобрением
tacit consent,
Великобритании, Франции
but
и
with the
Германии,
approval
которые
of the UK, France,
по-прежнему
and
считают
Germany,
себя
which continue to consider
полноправными
themselves
участниками
full-fledged
Софа.
parties to the JCPOA.
Их заверения,
Their assurances of
приверженности
their
поиску
commitment to a
дипломатического решения
diplomatic
в иранской
solution to
ядерной
the
программе
Iranian
и
nuclear
раньше никакого
program
доверия не
inspired little
вызывали.
confidence
Но
before,
сейчас
but
воспринимать их
currently
всерьез
they're
стало
absolutely
попросту невозможно.
impossible to take seriously.
Судите сами,
Judge for
сначала эти
yourselves
страны
that first these
сознательно
countries
отказались от реализации
deliberately
своей
refuse to
части
uphold their
обязательств
obligations
ядерной
under the
сделки,
nuclear deal
так и не обеспечив
by
условия
not
для создания
providing necessary
экономической отдачи
conditions
от
for
снятия европейских санкций
ensuring
в отношении
economic
Ирана,
benefits from the lifting of
действовавших до
European sanctions
2015
against
года.
Iran, which were in effect till 2015.
Потом они
And
последовали
then
по пути
they
вышедших
followed in the
из СПД
footsteps
в
of the US, which
2018
withdrew
году
from the
Соединенных
JCPOA in
Штатов и
2018
вслед за Вашингтоном возобновили
and
свое
renewed their
одностороннее санкционное
unilateral
давление на
sanctions
Тегеран,
pressure on Tehran, thus
перечеркнув тем самым перспективы
precluding any
полноформатного
prospect of
восстановления
a full
СПД,
restoration
о
of the
готовности которого
JCPOA, toward
неоднократно
which
говорили
our
иранские
Iranian
коллеги.
colleagues have repeatedly expressed their openness.
Параллельно Берлин,
At the
Лондон
same
и
time,
Париж
Berlin, London,
пытались
and Paris
изобразить
attempted
предпринятые
to
Ираном
portray
легитимные ответные
Iran's
меры,
legitimate
которые
retaliatory
они же
measures, which they
сами, то
themselves
есть Берлин, Лондон и
Berlin, London, and Paris provoked as unleashing some imaginary Iranian nuclear threat. They repeatedly attempted to undermine the cooperation between Iran and the IAEA Secretariat, which included efforts to settle unresolved questions. And even in spite of that, Iran remained and remains the most rigorously verified state out of all the members of the IAEA. And the Director General of the IAEA's reports clearly indicate the lack of any proliferation risk. Here I emphasize that the IAEA's reports in nowhere mention the conversion of Iran's nuclear material for military purposes or for any undeclared purposes. So the IAEA has observed no signs that Iran is developing a nuclear weapon. Therefore, all of the assertions of our Western colleagues to the contrary are falsehoods calculated for an audience that has not read these reports or that did not understand this issue. The cynicism and hypocrisy of our Western colleagues reached a peak on June 12th. On that day, the IAEA Board of Governors adopted yet another puffed-up resolution on Iran, divorced from reality and inspired by Western countries. Immediately afterward, Israel carried out strikes against Iran's peaceful nuclear sites. A week later, the sovereign territory of Iran was attacked by the U.S. And this demonstrates that this one-two punch was agreed upon ahead of time. The UK and France, which claim to be champions of diplomacy, rushed to defend the aggression of West Jerusalem and Washington. As a result, last Sunday, we witnessed another attempt to legitimize the use of force in contravention of the UN Charter and strikes on peaceful nuclear facilities in violation of the IAEA Charter and all norms of nuclear safety and security. And German Chancellor Friedrich Merz even made so bold as to cynically remark, as he already mentioned, that Israel is doing the Europeans' dirty work. These are the actual words of a head of government of a state party to the JCPOA. We must not forget that West Jerusalem began its operation 2 days before a scheduled round of Iran-U.S. talks on the nuclear issue, mediated by Oman, with the clear intention of sabotaging this process. Against this backdrop, the Western trio even had the audacity to call not for Israel and the U.S., but for Tehran, the victim of aggression, to return to the negotiating table. If our British, French, and German colleagues continue to threaten launching this Resolution 2031 that is a mechanism of sanctions by the Security Council on Iran, I'd like to remind them that there's no political, legal, or procedural basis for this. Berlin, London, and Paris have ironically violated this resolution and the JCPOA, and therefore do not have the right to engage this mechanism. And the U.S. no longer has any basis to do so, since it withdrew from the agreement. The Vienna mechanism for dispute settlement still has not been engaged. The U.S., the UK, France, and Germany do not have the moral right to mention this. It is their actions that truly have betrayed diplomacy and have led to the current situation. Madam President, such a responsibility in this regard lies with the IAEA and Secretariat, given the infringement by Israel and the U.S. on the global nuclear non-proliferation regime, which forms the basis for the NPT. The Director General and his colleagues are obligated to uphold their mandate, as well as the resolutions of the General Conference 444 and 533. The IAEA leadership must not content itself with evasive language and fragmented information, but rather provide detailed reports on the attacks against Iranian nuclear facilities under IAEA safeguards. At the same time, it's extremely important to call things by their names and directly indicate who exactly carried out targeted attacks in violation of the charters of the UN and IAEA and resolutions of the Security Council and General Conference of the IAEA. Unfortunately, we've already seen that the Director General of the IAEA includes sometimes subjective judgments alongside facts and statistics in his reports, and these are then used by a certain number of countries to justify their unprovoked aggression. Madam President, the Iranian nuclear program program can only be resolved through diplomacy, through negotiated solutions, which are based on international law and the principle of equal and indivisible security. The Russian Federation consistently has supported a peaceful solution to the concerns surrounding the Iranian nuclear program, which is acceptable to all parties as well as the international community as a whole. Here, the greatest responsibility lies on the UN Security Council, which is obligated to take the requisite measures. This is the goal of the draft resolution proposed by Russia together with our Chinese and Pakistani partners. Today, we are proposing to our Council colleagues an updated text that takes into account the latest developments and aims to bring about a lasting ceasefire as well as oversight of that ceasefire by the Security Council through Secretary General reporting. The JCPOA and Resolution 2231, adopted in 2015, demonstrated that the international community at that time rejected the military approach and clearly chose diplomacy instead. Today, we must make the same choice again without delay. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to thank Under-Secretary General Mr. Carlo, the head of the EU delegation, Mr. Lambrinidis, for the informative and timely briefing. I would also like to commend my Slovenian colleague Ambassador Spogar and his team for their efforts in timely compiling the Facilitator's report. Madam President, first of all, I would like to welcome President Trump's announcement of a ceasefire agreement, also commending the mediating efforts by the US and Qatar. It is a necessary first step towards sustainable security, which can only be achieved through diplomacy and a negotiated deal that would address all proliferation risks and guarantee the security of all countries of the region. Madam President, on today's issue of non-proliferation, allow me to highlight the following 3 points. First and foremost, Greece reiterates its unwavering commitment to preserving and strengthening the global nuclear non-proliferation regime. The IAEA and NPT remains indispensable institutional cornerstones. We therefore urge all state parties to comply with the full range of the obligation under the NPT. Secondly, we express serious concern of the findings of the DG Gross's most recent report of May 31st, as well as the IAEA board resolution adopted on June 12th. According to them, the agency's ability to verify Iran's implementation of its nuclear-related commitments under the JCPOA has been seriously affected. The cessation of Iran's application of the additional protocol, the removal of JCPOA-related monitoring and surveillance equipment, the non-compliance with its obligation under the Safeguards Agreement, and the access refusal to experienced AAA inspectors have collectively led to a loss of continuity of knowledge, a gap that the agency now confirms cannot be restored. Of equal concern is a steady increase in Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium. As of May 17, and since late February, Iran's total enriched uranium stockpile has been considerably increased and reached up to 60%. This is deeply alarming for a non-proliferation perspective, as there is no credible civilian use for uranium enriched to this level. We remain deeply concerned with the Director General's inability to provide assurances that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. Thirdly, Greece continues to view the JCPOA, as endorsed by this Council through Resolution 2231, as the best available framework to ensure that Iran's nuclear program remains exclusively peaceful. Its full and effective implementation would provide both transparency and confidence, not only with regard to verification, but also with a view towards sanctions relief, economic developments, and regional de-escalation. It is in this spirit that we fully support all diplomatic efforts to secure Tehran's full compliance with its obligations under the JCPOA. We welcome last Friday E3 Iran talks, while we call for the resumption of the US-Iran talks. As a country with historical ties and geographical proximity to the region, Greece stands ready to support all constructive efforts aimed at de-escalation, diplomacy, and dialogue. Madam President, in closing, let me stress that Iran, as a matter of fact no other nation, must never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. The international community cannot afford a major nuclear proliferation crisis. With the credibility of the global non-proliferation regime at stake, and with military escalation threatening the security and stability of the Middle East, the time has come for responsible action. We call on all parties to demonstrate political will, engage meaningfully and in good faith, and reaffirm the commitment to dialogue and diplomacy. As the events of the last day demonstrate, we are glad that even in these very difficult circumstances, the window of diplomacy has remained open, and there is now an opportunity for addressing through dialogue all concerns about the Iranian nuclear program. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Madam President. And as others, I thank Undersecretary General Di Carlo, Ambassador Lambrinidis, and Ambassador Spoga for your briefings and updates. Madam President, the situation in the Middle East continues to evolve. We welcome the announced ceasefire between Israel and Iran as a critical step towards de-escalation in a region that has endured far too much instability. We urge both parties to adhere to it and to abide by their obligations under the UN Charter and international law. This moment must be seized, not only to consolidate gains in regional security, but also to create the necessary space for renewed diplomatic engagement on the nuclear file. It is in the interest of all parties to pursue a negotiated solution, which is the only viable path to restore stability and lasting peace in the region. Madam President, even before the recent developments, Denmark has continuously expressed our concern about Iran's nuclear trajectory and its activities in blatant violation of the JCPOA. We have also persistently warned against an Iranian withdrawal from the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Our position is clear. Iran must never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. This follows Iran's obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty and its commitments under the JCPOA. It is therefore deeply alarming that the recent IAEA report shows that Iran has failed to declare nuclear material in its possession and demonstrate that Iran has impeded and obstructed agency verification activities, as also conveyed by the 2231 Facilitator letter. We reiterate our great concern that the IAEA is unable to assure that the Iranian nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. These concerns are furthered by Iran's production and stockpiling of vast amounts of enriched uranium with no plausible civilian purpose. It still remains unclear whether Iran has ceased its enriching activities. We do not take it lightly and call on Iran to change its course of action and abide by its obligation. This remains true, even if recent events have changed the circumstances surrounding the Iranian nuclear issue. Madam President, as many has highlighted here today, this is the last mandated meeting before the expiration of the JCPOA, meaning there is no time to spare. Iran must, therefore, engage seriously in negotiations with the international community, leading to an agreement which addresses all concerns related to its nuclear program. Securing an agreement on the nuclear issue has the potential to foster lasting stability in the Middle East. All efforts must be deployed to this end. The role of the IAEA's verification and monitoring of Iran's nuclear program remains imperative, also in the current situation. Denmark strongly supports the agency's professional and impartial efforts in carrying out its mandate to verify the implementation of Iran's safeguard obligations, especially during these complex circumstances where the safety and security of the inspectors must also be kept in mind. Madam President, in closing, we continue to call for a diplomatic solution. Only a negotiated solution can bring a lasting settlement to concerns about Iran's nuclear program. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President. We thank Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Ambassador Stavros Lambrinidis for their briefings. I would also like to thank Ambassador Samuel Spoga for presenting the report in his capacity as the facilitator of the 2231 format. Madam President, the core common element of these three briefings that we just heard in this meeting was the primacy of a peaceful diplomatic solution. We are meeting at a crucial point in the implementation of Resolution 2231 and Security Council's consideration of Iran's nuclear issue. Obviously, the developments of the past 2 weeks have impacted the context of the whole issue
and have a bearing on our discussions today. However, what has not changed are the fundamental principles and multilateral spirit behind the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and the Resolution 2231 adopted 10 years ago. The JCPOA was a unique instrument, manifestation of an approach based on dialogue, diplomacy, and pragmatism. It was the outcome of painstaking and arduous, yet constructive negotiations. It charted a roadmap to comprehensively address the concerns of the parties concerned by clearly defining their relevant obligations and responsibilities. While proceeding very well, the agreement was regrettably disrupted, leaving many complications in its wake that impacted the full and faithful implementation of the JCPOA by various parties. Notwithstanding those challenges, the most widely held view was that dialogue, diplomacy, and constructive engagement was the only viable way forward. That view was still there and was indeed back in play with the negotiations between Iran and the United States facilitated by Oman, till it was violently disrupted by the unlawful and illegal military attacks on the IAEA safeguarded Iranian nuclear facilities. These military strikes also impeded the IAEA's crucial verification functions in Iran. Pakistan has expressed its clear position on these developments in this chamber and elsewhere over the past 2 weeks. Our leadership has also remained actively engaged with counterparts from many other countries during this period. Madam President, what we have witnessed should never have happened. Even now, it is our firm belief that these actions should not be allowed to further complicate the peaceful resolution of long-standing issues, as well as the full and effective implementation of Resolution 2231. We reaffirm our support for the resolution of the Iranian nuclear issue through peaceful means, diplomatic engagement, and sustained dialogue. Pakistan advocates the preservation and renewal of the JCPOA or its substitution by an equally sound agreement that is acceptable to all sides before it expires in October this year. The IAEA is the institution responsible for verifying compliance with the respective nuclear safeguards obligations of member states. It is mandated to do so in an objective, impartial, and credible manner, purely on technical grounds. The IAEA must be enabled to fulfill this statutory function. We believe that verification activities by the IAEA should continue unimpeded. The IAEA must continue its work in an impartial and apolitical manner to provide objective reporting and credible information regarding the issues under its purview. Madam President, with regards to recent developments in the region, I would like to emphasize the following points. First, condemnation of violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of member states, and the threat or use of force to settle disputes. Second, clear rejection of attacks on IAEA safeguarded nuclear facilities, which violate Security Council and IAEA resolutions as well as international humanitarian law. Third, we request the Secretary General to report on the implications of these developments on the implementation of Resolution 2231, particularly those arising from military strikes against nuclear facilities. And we also request the Director General IAEA to share his assessment from legal, technical, safety, security, and safeguards points of view. Fourth, we urge sustained cessation of hostilities and a permanent ceasefire to allow resumption of dialogue and verification activities by the IAEA. Fifth, There is an urgent need to renew diplomatic engagement to seriously and faithfully address the outstanding issues in a cooperative manner as per the rights, obligations, and responsibilities of the parties concerned. Madam President, we welcome the announcement of the ceasefire understanding between Iran and Israel, and we expect this to be fully respected. We commend all those who played a pivotal role in facilitating this development and hope this positive step will contribute to lasting peace and stability in the region. This is a vital step that must now be followed up by constructive and comprehensive engagement. Pakistan firmly believes that all disputes must be resolved in accordance with the principles of the UN Charter and international law, including respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. We call on all parties to fulfill their respective obligations and responsibilities and avoid any further escalation. Most importantly, the trust and confidence in the diplomatic engagement that was damaged by the unprovoked aggression must be meticulously restored. The Council should allow sufficient time to continuing efforts between the IAEA and Iran, as well as other parties, to resolve outstanding issues. Recent developments have yet again manifested the grave dangers that present themselves when there are violations of the UN Charter and international law. The cost of seeking to resolve issues through military means is more than evident. The region, and indeed the whole world, cannot be held hostage to such adventures, dangerous precedents, and spiraling escalations. Diplomatic engagement and the resumption of dialogue are the best means to resolve all outstanding issues. Diplomacy has delivered previously, and with the necessary political will, it can certainly deliver again. Lastly, allow me to inform the Council that following up on the draft resolution circulated by China, Pakistan, and Russia on Sunday, we have updated and revised the text to reflect the latest developments, including the ceasefire, and have circulated it to Council members. Securing the ceasefire was one of the primary objectives of the draft resolution, in addition to calling for a negotiated settlement of the Iranian nuclear issue and promoting respect for international law under all circumstances. We will engage constructively with fellow members on the text of this draft resolution with a view to arriving at a consensus outcome, signifying the Council's support for sustained ceasefire and sustained dialogue and diplomatic engagement for a lasting solution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And I thank Under-Secretary General Di Carlo, Ambassador Lambrinidis, and Ambassador Zboga for your briefings. Let me start by welcoming the announcement by President Trump of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. But the situation remains extremely fragile. We call on all sides to respect the ceasefire in full. Our priority remains stability in the Middle East, and we are clear that restarting this conflict is in no one's interest. Now is the time for a return to diplomacy. We, along with our partners, are clear that only diplomacy can achieve a durable solution to the Iranian nuclear threat. We urge Iran to take this opportunity to engage in negotiations now. It is critical that Iran does not miss this window for diplomacy. President, as we know, Iran's nuclear program has been far beyond any credible civilian justification, including an enriched uranium stockpile 40 times the limit set by the JCPOA. It is urgent that the IAEA have full access, especially on Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. We have been clear that Iran cannot develop or acquire a nuclear weapon. The UK, alongside our E3 partners, stands ready to support efforts towards a negotiated solution. We will use all diplomatic levers at our disposal to support a negotiated outcome and ensure Iran does not develop a nuclear weapon. President, finally, we commend the IAEA and the Director General for their vital work, including under the mandate of UN Security Council Resolution 2231. They have displayed professionalism and impartiality, and they have our full support. We urge Iran to cooperate with the IAEA in the interests of both safety and diplomacy. Colleagues, we urge all parties to urgently pursue a deal that establishes international confidence long-term that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. This ceasefire is the first step towards that. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of China.
President, I thank USG DiCarlo, Ambassador Lambrinidis of the EU delegation to the UN, and Ambassador Spoga, permanent representative of Slovenia, for their briefings. Israel and the United States, on the grounds of possible future threats, resorted to the use of force against Iran in serious violation of international law and Iran's sovereignty. What's more, striking Iranian nuclear facilities that are placed under the IAEA safeguards sets a bad precedent, which threatens the international non-proliferation regime, which China once again unequivocally condemns. The aforementioned acts have also undermined diplomatic efforts to resolve the Iranian nuclear issue and created a high degree of uncertainty to the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231. China is gravely concerned and deeply worried about this. President, China has noted that some members of this Council have done nothing but accuse Iran of violating its non-proliferation obligations in an attempt to justify the military actions of Israel and the United States. Here, China wishes to remind these countries of the following basic facts. It is none other than the United States that started the Iranian nuclear crisis. The United States unilaterally withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018. Thereafter, it reinstated and escalated unilateral sanctions against Iran and adopted measures of maximum pressure, which prevented Iran from enjoying the economic dividends conferred by the agreement and forced the country to reduce fulfilling its obligations under the agreement. It is again the United States, throwing to the wind its own credibility, launched military strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities, undermining the negotiation process initiated by itself, leading the Iranian nuclear issue to yet another impasse and resulting in an abrupt escalation of the regional situation. Iran's sincerity in resolving the nuclear crisis should be valued. Up till today, Iran continues to fulfill its nuclear non-proliferation obligations and implement the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. Iran has repeatedly stated that it does not seek to develop nuclear weapons. It conducted several rounds of professional and pragmatic negotiations with the United States in a constructive manner and never abandoned its diplomatic efforts. However, some countries, citing the report of the Director General of IAEA in a one-sided manner and ignoring the positive aspects of Iran's cooperation with the agency, pushed for the adoption of a resolution by the IAEA Board of Governors without adequate consultations, thus jeopardizing the atmosphere of dialogue while intensifying tension and confrontation. We call on these countries to reflect long and hard on the adverse consequences of their irresponsible move. President, China is of the view that we have yet to exhaust all diplomatic means to resolve the Iranian nuclear issue, and there is still hope for a peaceful solution. It is necessary for all parties to draw lessons from this, restart the dialogue on an equal footing, and promote the return of the Iranian nuclear issue to the track of a political settlement. I wish to stress 3 points. First, The priority is to stop the fighting. Facts have shown that force is not an option for resolving international disputes, and there's no way that it can resolve the Iranian nuclear issue now. China has taken note of the current developments on the ground and looks forward to the realization of a genuine ceasefire that can effectively hold. The parties concerned should take practical measures to prevent the situation from escalating again. Meanwhile, the international community must make efforts to cool down the situation and promote dialogue and negotiation. Second, we must recognize that a political solution is the only way forward. The core aim and objectives set out in the JCPOA and Resolution 2231 remain valid in the next step of the political settlement of this issue. We must adhere to the general direction of a political and diplomatic solution and oppose the use of force and illegal sanctions. In order to balance the objectives of nuclear non-proliferation and peaceful uses of nuclear energy, Iran must continue to abide by its commitment not to develop nuclear weapons, and parties should fully respect Iran's right to peaceful uses of nuclear energy as a state party to the NPT treaty. All parties should insist on addressing the legitimate concerns through dialogue and consultation on an equal footing. Third, to start dialogue and negotiation is the fundamental way forward. China supports all efforts to relaunch the Iranian nuclear negotiations and believes that this is also the position of the vast majority of Council members. The Security Council should play a constructive role in assisting parties in building trust, bridging differences, and creating conditions conducive to the resumption of negotiations. Relevant countries should abandon the practice of threatening to activate snapback mechanism at every turn, as this will only aggravate tensions and confrontations and even further jeopardize diplomatic efforts. A proper solution of the Iranian nuclear issue has a direct bearing on the authority and effectiveness of the international non-proliferation regime and is crucial to peace and stability in the Middle East. At present, the situation in the region is at a critical and crucial juncture. China calls on all parties to act with a higher sense of urgency and responsibility to de-escalate the situation as soon as possible and resume negotiations at the earliest possible date. As a permanent member of the Security Council and a party to the JCPOA, China will continue to maintain an objective and impartial position, strengthen communication and coordination with all parties to build synergy, and uphold fairness and justice with a view to playing a constructive role in restoring peace in the Middle East and promoting a political solution to the Iranian nuclear issue. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as representative of Guyana. I thank the USG Rosemary DiCarlo for presenting the 19th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231, and Ambassador Samuel Bogar for presenting the Facilitator's report. I also thank Ambassador Lambrinidis for his briefing. In light of the recent escalations over the past 2 weeks, Guyana welcomes the announced ceasefire between Israel and Iran. We reiterate our call for dialogue and a return to the negotiating table as the only way forward for a diplomatic solution, one that promotes regional and international peace and security. Guyana also urges all parties to exercise maximum restraint and to unequivocally commit to safeguarding all nuclear installations in accordance with their international obligations. Colleagues, we stand at a critical juncture, with Resolution 2231 being mere months away from expiration and a joint comprehensive plan of action still to achieve its core mandate. Guyana recalls that the JCPOA, endorsed by Resolution 2231, was meant to ensure that Iran's nuclear program will be of an exclusively peaceful nature. Guyana also recalls that Resolution 2231 encouraged member states to cooperate with Iran in the framework of the JCPOA, including through IAEA involvement. It also encourages cooperation in the field of peaceful uses of nuclear energy and engagement in mutually determined civil nuclear cooperation projects in accordance with Annex 3 of the JCPOA. We acknowledge the 19th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231. We concur with his assessment that a diplomatic solution that ensures the exclusively peaceful nature of the Iranian nuclear program and promotes economic and trade cooperation between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the international community is the only viable pathway to peace and prosperity. We took note of last month's IAEA report on Iran's implementation of its commitment under the JCPOA, submitted in accordance with paragraph 4 of Resolution 2231. Notwithstanding the current circumstances, in fact, because of it, we encourage continued cooperation between the IAEA and Iran, including in addressing outstanding safeguards issues and in assessing the safety and security risks of the nuclear facilities. We also support the vital efforts of the Secretary General and the Joint Commission's procurement channel in facilitating the implementation of Resolution 2231 and the plan. Colleagues, Guyana recalls that agreement on the JCPOA was reached through intensive multilateral negotiations. We must continue to work towards the full implementation of the plan. Guyana believes that this is vital to ensuring regional and international peace and security, and for building confidence and trust among the parties. We therefore urge all participants to return to the plan and to engage in dialogue and diplomacy as a matter of urgency. Mutually assured destruction can never be a good policy. We urge stronger commitment toward the Non-Proliferation Treaty and encourage states that have not yet done so to accede to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. We underscore the need for decisive action by the international community in advancing the abolition of nuclear weapons. In conclusion, I reiterate Guyana's commitment to a world free of nuclear weapons and one where there is greater investment in peace. I thank you. I resume my function as President of the Council. The representative of the United States has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give her the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I am compelled to respond to some assertions made by certain council members. I spoke earlier about the precision operation the United States took to degrade Iran's capacity to produce a nuclear weapon. We did not take this action lightly, and we are confident that it is consistent with the inherent right of self-defense under the UN Charter. Nothing in the IAEA statute prevents states from taking legitimate steps for their own or collective self-defense. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you. In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, thank you, Madam President, for convening this meeting. Today is International Women's Day in Diplomacy. Let me begin by congratulating you and all women diplomats on this occasion. I also congratulate you on your successful leadership of the Council thus far in June. And I commend your tireless efforts in convening emergency meeting to draw the Security Council attention to the aggression by Israel and the United States against my country and the blatant violation. I wish to sincerely thank our brotherly and friendly nation, the State of Qatar, for its sincere and diplomatic efforts to help end Israeli aggression, establish a ceasefire, and prevent a further escalation of regional tensions that threaten peace and stability in the region. We thank Under Secretary General Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. We take note of the Secretary General's report. We echo ourselves with the Secretary General's call for a diplomatic solution in his report, as well as with the USG in her today's briefing. We welcome Slovenia as facilitator of Resolution 2231 and appreciate Ambassador Jubogar and his team for preparing the report and today's briefing. We take note the statement made by the Ambassador Lambrinidis, head of delegation of the European Union in the capacity of the coordinator of JCPOA. Madam President, first and foremost, I wish to express my strong objection to the participation of the delegation of the Israeli regime in this meeting. Legally and procedurally, Israel has no standing to take part in this meeting. This regime has no connection to the agenda of the meeting, no Resolution 2231 or the JCPOA. The participants to the JCPOA, as mentioned in Resolution 2231, are clearly defined, and the Council's practice in convening meeting under this agenda item has always been limited to the JCPOA participants. Madam President, this meeting is the final Security Council briefing on Resolution 2231 before its expiration in October 2025. In this context, I would like to make following points. First, the U.S. unilateral withdrawal from the JCPOA in 2018, it then imposed illegal extraterritorial sanctions violating UN Security Council Resolution 2231. Iran has honored its commitment in confront the United States with the full support from the UK, France, and Germany has repeatedly violated both the spirit and letter of the JCPOA, as well as Resolution 2231. The root causes of the current situation are simple and clear. Therefore, they are not in a position to accuse Iran of non-compliance. Second, today's meeting takes place as my country faces an unprovoked military aggression that blatantly violates international law, the UN Charter, the Statute of the IAEA, the General Conference Resolution, and Resolution 2231. This Resolution 2231 calls on all UN member states to avoid actions that undermine the resolution and the JCPOA. However, with the full US support, Israel has targeted Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities, civilians, and civilian infrastructure. Israel falsely justified these attacks on Iran's peaceful nuclear program as an imminent threat. This claim is baseless and has no legal base. In reality, Israel, the region's only undeclared nuclear armed entity and non-party to NPT, refused IAEA inspections and monitoring, while Iran complies with the NPT and has subjected its nuclear program to the most rigorous IAEA monitoring. The breach of Resolution 2231 and international law is not limited to Israel. The United States, a permanent council member responsible for upholding its resolution, also attacked Iran nuclear facilities under IAEA safeguard. Third, it is profoundly troubling that even after a decade of Resolution 2231, Iran's fully monitored peaceful nuclear program has been repeatedly targeted by Israel and the United States. These illegal actions set a dangerous precedent, undermine the non-proliferation regime, and damage the credibility of the Security Council. Resolution 2231 was intended to promote peaceful solution and strengthen the Council's role in preventing unnecessary crises. However, reckless attacks on Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities by Israel and the US has gravely weakened this role. It is disappointing that the Council failed to condemn these illegal attacks, despite a strong request by Resolution 487, which prohibits such illegal acts. We call on the Council to, at the very least, explicitly condemn these aggressions and ensure they don't happen again. Fourth, the double standards are blatant. While the US, the UK, France maintain massive nuclear arsenals and overlook Israeli undeclared stockpiles, they baselessly claim Iran's peaceful program threatens international peace and security. These political accusations have been refuted for years by Iran's transparency and by its full cooperation with IAEA. If they truly care about the non-proliferation regime, they must condemn Israel's violation of international law and Resolution 487. Fifth, claims that Iran has violated Resolution 2231 are groundless. For past decades, Iran has upheld Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA. Our remedial measures have been fully consistent with these two instruments, meant only to restore balance and encourage all parties to return to their commitment. Iran remedial measure must not be misused to justify new pressure on the JCPOA or Resolution 2231. The Council must prevent any attempt to manipulate this mechanism against Iran. Sixth, Resolution 2231 must conclude on a schedule, and Iran reject any attempt to revive expired provisions under any pretext. Unfortunately, European JCPOA participants have failed to meet their obligation. Even worse, they falsely assert that Iran is close to acquiring nuclear weapons, a falsehood unsupported by credible evidence. Our peaceful program under strict IAEA verification cannot be denied. Despite this aggression and the unconstructive behavior of the European parties, Iran remained committed to diplomacy and peaceful dispute resolution. Resolution 2231 proved that diplomacy can and must resolve differences. Seventh, Iran continues to believe a diplomatic resolution to nuclear and sanction issue is possible. Our commitment is evident through our full implementation of JCPOA and Resolution 2231. But if the other parties truly want a resolution, they must respect Iran's right and stop undermining diplomacy. 8. Iran never initiated this war. Once the aggressors stopped their attacks, Iran stopped its lawful military response as well. Nevertheless, Iran will not overlook the deceit and double standards. Our brave armed forces remain fully prepared to respond to any further threats or violation. Finally, to conclude, Madam President, we are now closer to diplomacy than ever before. The large-scale war they thought could force Iran into so-called unconditional surrender and make it abandon its peaceful nuclear program through intimidation, threats, and the use of force has failed more clearly than ever. They unleashed their full military might, supporting and providing Israel with advanced fighter jets, sophisticated weaponry, and the most powerful bombs, even bunker busters, to attack Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities, and covertly, deliberately, and indiscriminately targeted civilians and critical infrastructures. These attacks led to the martyrdom of hundreds of innocent people, including women, children, nuclear scientists, academics, athletes, students, aid workers, and senior military officials, and left thousands more injured. We honor martyrs for their sacrifices as well as our brave, patriotic people in defense of our homeland. Iran emerged proud and steadfast in the face of this criminal aggression. This proves one simple truth more clearly than ever: diplomacy and dialogue are the only path to resolving the unnecessary crisis over Iran's peaceful program. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Germany.
Madam President, I would like to thank Under-Secretary General Di Carlo, Ambassador Spogar, and Ambassador Lambrinides for their valuable briefings and continuous efforts to implement United Nations Security Council Resolution 2231. For 2 decades, this Council has been deliberating on the Iranian nuclear program. We find ourselves at a particularly difficult juncture today. France, Germany, and the United Kingdom have consistently made every effort to find a diplomatic solution with Iran and will continue to do so, but the Iranian nuclear program remains a threat to international peace and security. Last Friday, the E3 foreign ministers and the EU High Representative met with their Iranian counterpart in Geneva to call upon Iran to engage in negotiations. We will continue our joint diplomatic effort to address all concerns associated with Iran's nuclear program. We have always been clear, Iran must not have a nuclear weapon. It can only be a non-nuclear weapon state under the NPT and must respect its nuclear safeguards obligations. Our efforts, conducted jointly with many partners around the globe, have aimed at preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. We successfully concluded the JCPOA, which put robust and verifiable restrictions on Iran's nuclear program and would have provided the entire international community with confidence that Iran's nuclear activities remain exclusively peaceful. Throughout the last years, we witnessed an expansion of Iran's nuclear program far beyond Iran's commitments under the JCPOA. As of last month, Iran's enriched uranium stockpile were 40 times higher than allowed under the JCPOA limits. Iran continued to enrich uranium to up to 60%, which lacks any plausible civilian purpose, in an underground facility. It stopped implementing almost all of its key and transparency commitments it subscribed to under the JCPOA as well. The E3 have always pursued diplomacy to find a solution to the Iranian nuclear proliferation crisis. In 21 and 22, we negotiated in good faith to bring the US back into the JCPOA and Iran to full compliance with its commitments. To no avail. Iran twice refused a fair proposal put on the table by the coordinator and decided to further escalate its nuclear program to the level we all know. In conjecture with Iran's failure to comply with its legally binding safeguards obligations, an assessment that was confirmed by the Board of Governors resolution last month, Iran's nuclear activities have remained a threat to regional and global security. Iran's nuclear program continues to pose serious proliferation concerns. We are particularly concerned by any possible relocation of nuclear materials since the recent military strikes. We reiterate that as a member of the NPT and its nuclear safeguards regime, Iran is obliged to declare and put all nuclear material located in Iran under IAEA safeguards. Iran must fully cooperate with the agency and refrain from threats against its personnel and DG Grossi himself, whose professional work we commend. In this regard, we are alerted by the initiative in the Iranian parliament to suspend cooperation with the agency, as well as by Iran's deliberations to withdraw from the NPT. In closing, let me welcome the ceasefire between Israel and Iran announced yesterday and call on, like others, Germany joins calls on all sides to respect it and to re-engage in diplomacy. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Germany for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I would like to thank USG De Carlo and the representatives from the EU and Slovenia for their remarks. To my colleague, the ambassador of Iran, I advise you, instead of giving advice to the Council how to conduct its affairs, to comply with the resolution of the Security Council, so we don't have to come back here almost every day and discuss the violations of Iran. Madam President, since launching Operation Rising Lion, Israel has worked to remove a double existential threat from both the nuclear threat and ballistic missiles. The IDF achieved complete air superiority over Tehran, struck a severe blow to the military leadership, and destroyed dozens of key regime targets. Our forces achieved the objectives of our operation in removing these threats. In full coordination with President Trump, Israel has agreed to the President's proposal for a ceasefire. We thank the United States for its support and critical role in removing the Iranian nuclear threat. Last night, the Iranian regime fired missiles at our civilian population. 4 innocent civilians were murdered in Beersheba. Their tragic deaths are a reminder of the evil we dealt with, a regime that could not restrain its hatred. Israel is a peaceful nation. We pray for peace 3 times a day. But make no mistake, we will respond forcefully to any violation of the ceasefire and any threat facing our people. I have no doubt that the leadership and the determination Israel displayed will allow the Abraham Accords to expand and bring other nations into the fold of normalization. Madam President, if there were a Nobel Prize for deception, the Iranian regime would win it every single year. It has broken every commitment it has ever made. There is no reason to believe this deception will not continue. Let's walk through the facts. In July 2015, this Council endorsed the JCPOA. Iran supposedly agreed to many conditions, restricting its enrichment, reducing its stockpile, and opening its facilities for inspection. In return, it was granted sanctions relief and global legitimacy. But even then, Iran was already building its exit strategy. By July 2019, Iran has already breached the 300-kilogram limit on enriched uranium. In January 2021, it resumed enrichment to 20%, more than 5 times the agreed limit. In April of that same year, it crossed into truly dangerous territory, enriching uranium to 60%. This is a level with no civilian application. In June 2022, Iran removed the IAEA's surveillance cameras and monitoring equipment, attempting to eliminate all oversight. Today, the IAEA is completely blind. As of May 2025, Iran's enriched uranium stockpile stands at over 9,000 kilograms. This includes more than 400 kilograms enriched to 60%. The IAEA has confirmed it can no longer verify the extent of Iran's program. For years, the international community spoke of Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA as a framework for peace. But for Iran, it was a framework for deception. While the diplomats and politicians talked, Iran built. While you negotiated, they enriched. While you hoped, they lied. Today, the regime in Tehran stands completely exposed as a regime that has weaponized every opportunity you gave it. Iran did not abandon its commitments last week or last month. It walked away from its obligations years ago, if it ever kept to them at all. It has been violating this resolution with impunity for as long as it existed. This Council just refused to see it. We all know that Iran's level of enrichment has no civilian usage. It's a fact. The Council doesn't need a nuclear scientist to understand what that means. The international community now knows what Israel has known for a long time. Iran was working on the key elements for a nuclear bomb in hidden facilities protected from international view. These were facilities like Fordo, originally built for 90% enrichment and hidden from the IAEA. Iran engaged in systematic, calculated assault on every safeguard this Council claimed would prevent them from attaining a bomb. Colleagues, Israel has been warning you for years. We warned you when Iran crossed the enrichment threshold. We warned you when it denied IAEA inspectors access. We warned you when it spun lies at the negotiating table. Many of you refused to listen. You held onto the illusion that diplomacy was working. You convinced yourselves that silence was stability. You told yourselves that time was on your side. It wasn't. Iran used diplomacy as cover. It used this Council caution as protection. It used Resolution 2231 as protection while it built its dangerous arsenal. For years, what was Iran met with? Statements, concern, condemnations, but without consequences. Israel did what responsible nations must do when faced with extermination. We took action. We moved to dismantle what the world had allowed to grow unchecked. Madam President, This council was built to uphold international law, not to be exploited by those who trample it. Today, as we speak, Iran remains untouched by consequences from the broader international community. The same Iran that refused IAEA inspections, the same Iran that enriched uranium to weapons-grade levels, the same Iran that used its seat at the table to delay, deceive, and arm itself. Madam President, there is still time to take meaningful and decisive action to ensure that the threat of a nuclear Iran does not return stronger than before. The international community must reassert its authority, it must remain vigilant, it must reimpose the measures necessary to deny Iran the tools of destruction. It must do so before the clock runs out. We are often told that diplomacy must be given a chance. It was given every chance, every round, every channel, every deadline, but so far it has failed. The regime in Tehran never had any intention of complying. Colleagues, you know who you are dealing with. You are not engaging with a regime that negotiates in good faith. You are dealing with the masters of lies, deceit, and delay. You have seen how they respond to your usual approach. So I urge you, take a different approach. Israel has done its part. The United States has done its part. Now the world must do its part. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Israel for his statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.